And it looks like cylinder 1 here is about 170 psi. 30 over. So it's been overboard. So it's definitely been to a machine shop. I have a peek inside the turbo here. Our black and wet. Oh, hi. Welcome back to Hot Rod Guy Garage. We got something different in the garage today. So let's get into it. So guys, something a little different. At least for a couple of videos. Behind me is a 1987 Buick Grand National. It's actually one of the viewers' cars. It's been having some issues running. It needs some things cleaned up. So what we're going to do, and especially in this video, we're going to dive deep into this car and kind of see exactly what is here. Because he don't know nothing about it, and neither do I. So we need to get a good service plan in action for this car. And what that means is we need to play detective and figure out exactly what mods this car has, if it's even a real Grand National, and you know, dive in deeper. So let's start simple right here with the VIN number. Our third digit is going to designate this is a Buick. So we got number 4 that designates Buick. Now we're going to jump to our 8th digit. That is going to be a 7. That is going to designate that it is a 3.8 turbo. Now that could also be an A Turbo T or a T-type Buick. So it just proves that we have the turbo motor. So our 10th digit in this case is going to be an H. That's going to designate this is a 1987. Okay, so obviously we have a 1987 Buick Regal with the Turbo V6 in it. The VIN is not going to tell you if this is a Grand National or not a Grand National. One other thing you need to check is a sticker under the trunk. And that sticker is going to be right here. And what we're going to look for is the WE2. So sometimes you have to go around here and you're going to have to look through these numbers. But this should say WE2 right here. And that proves that this is a real Grand National. So there's a bunch of other things right here, but this G80 means it has the limited slip 8.5 rear end in it. On this line right here, GU6, that is the 342 gear. The G80 is the limited slip unit. The G87 denotes the 8.5 10 bolt. And if we go a little further, the LC2 right here denotes that it's the 3.8 turbo V6. And like I said before, the WE2 denotes the Grand National. The VIN number here on top of the sticker should match the VIN plate on your car. I am no stranger to these cars, and I have worked on very many of them, so I take some of that stuff for granted and kind of skimmed over it. That's why I come back and clarified it for you guys. But those are the most important options on a Grand National. It's got the big rear end, and it's got the right code on there for it to be a Grand National, and that tag is on the trunk lid. They do repop those, but if you don't have those codes off your old one, you're kind of screwed. So let's delve into, we'll just do a tour of the car and we'll go over it and we'll see what we see. So since we're in the trunk here, I see that it has an exhaust instruction, so I'm going to assume it has a pipes exhaust and it has a comp cam, paper right there. So I'm going to assume that it has a camshaft in it. And looks like somebody has changed the mass air meter, which that's not a Grand National style anyway, but that is a GM mass air. And old Power Master brackets, and looks like a box of wires and stuff. So here we are. We got a set of drag radials on here, and it looks like it has a 3-inch pipe on it. So I'm going to assume that's going to go with our exhaust. It's still got the rear Grand National sway bar up under it. Obviously a reproduction set of wheels in the factory style flavor. We're going to dive under the hood here, and sticking out at us is a precision turbo and an old school Turbonetics wastegate. So those are old go fast parts. It looks like we have a alky control tank right here and a braided line for a water methanol injection kit. Looks like it's got a set of aftermarket plug wires on it, which looks like a maybe yep, that's an old school set of Thunderbolt Taylors 8.2s. Looks like it's got a set of stock exhaust manifolds. Somebody's painted silver. The timing cover has obviously been off. Old school breather, everybody put on these. We got a billet vacuum block. Let's see, we got a stock intercooler down there. Adjustable fuel pressure regulator and pressure gauge, which is necessities on a Turbo Buick. We got a cold air intake here that looks like it is unsupported and rattling on the alternator bracket. That will make one of these throw knock sensor codes and run poorly. Along with a zip tie holding the mass airflow meter to the boot, and that's not a great way to do that either. Old parts store air filter with the cap of death in the center. These things are known to come loose and get sucked in your turbo and trash it. Old turbo tweak axis interface for the mass airflow translator. Kind of just hanging out here. Got a vacuum brake conversion, which is one of the best things you can do with one of these cars, is getting rid of that power master. And it makes a bunch more room getting down here to spark plugs. So looks like some pretty basic mods. And obviously it's got AC delete. I skimmed over that, but missing an AC compressor down here, and it's got the idler pulley. But looks like a pretty decently modded Grand National. One other thing I skimmed over, this does not have the correct radiator in it. It's actually not even technically mounted, it's just rattling around in there. This thing is way too small, and looks like you gotta take the top plate off of it to check the coolant in it, so that's something that will need to be addressed. Nice radiator, just not for this car. And inside looks like it needs a steering wheel, which there's one back here in the back seat. Got an assortment of gauges. Old school air fuel gauge. The old rich lean thing that hooks to your factory O2. Boost gauge. Don't know what that one is yet, but we don't have a scan master, it don't look like, unless that's a scan master gauge. Quite possibly could be. Alky control stuff. The typical Buick Grand National wire and harness rat's nest. Oh, plenty under the dash. I wish I could say this is a rarity on these cars, but a lot of times people just tuck that stuff up on that plate that goes under the dash, and you know, you can't see it, so it's not a problem. Well, this one's obviously a problem. Well, let's put some power and see if it, yep, that is our scan master. So that's a very important thing to have, especially on a Turbo Buick, because it can give you a lot of data and useful data on the fly that is super important to have one of these cars run correctly. So one thing I don't see that I would love to see in this car is get rid of that old school air fuel gauge and put a wide band in it, because those are just an approximation off the O2 sensor voltage, and if the O2 sensor is bad, that's not going to read correctly either. So that might be some of why it's running bad. We'll just have to see. So our next step here is, a lot of this other stuff is going to be kind of irrelevant, like the stuff it needs cosmetically. We're not worried about that on this car. We need to pull the computer out of it and see what chip this thing has in it, or if we can identify what chip it has. That way we kind of can make sure the injectors are correct and that match the chip. So let's get to that. So on Turbo Buick, your computer is going to be in your passenger side kick panel right here, and most of the time these things are just stuck up there. In this case, this one just has screws stuck in it. So right here we can see it has a Turbo Tweak chip in it, and there's no, they used to put a sticker on here, give you information on the injector size and stuff. This one not so much. So what we need to do is just make sure this thing is secured. We need to make sure our other little feller here is down. This one was not all the way down, so let's just push this down, make sure it is secured. sure our chip's secured. And it's also a good idea, guys, if you get the cover, to put this back on here, because G-bodies aren't necessarily the most watertight thing, and you get moisture in here, you're gonna have a bad day. Well, I flipped open the glove box and we got a fuel pressure gauge, and we got 3 other chips. So we may need to pop that turbo tweak chip out, because this one, it's stamped on the bottom what these are. So let's get into that. It looks like he's in the glove box. This is a 91 octane chip. I know it's hard to see. This one is a 93 for 16 and 18 psi. Not sure what this is, but it's probably a custom burnt chip of some sort. Kind of looks like an old Reg chip, but I don't know. Alright, so I got the EEPROM out. On these, you want to make sure all your sockets look good in these ECMs. Because over the years, they get a bunch of them swapped out, and you want to make sure. Looks like this has a 60 pound-an-hour injector chip in it with a base of 17 for our Axis mass airflow translator. So I'm going to reinstall our chip back in the ECM, put these others back in the glove box, and make sure that our injectors are correct. I'm going to assume they are, but you know what assuming does, especially in a car that has running issues. And here is our camshaft. Like it is a 260H grind. So you're a 459 lift and a 260 duration at a 0.006 tappet lift. So at 50,000 numbers, that's a 212, 212, 459, 459 on a 112. So pretty decent little camshaft for a Turbo Buick. And I'm going to assume that that chip is burnt for this camshaft, because that's another thing that can make one run bad if you don't let your chip tuner know all the mods done to your car. So on to our injectors. I got this one twisted, and I know you guys can't see because it's dark, but there's a number on here right here. You can take and Google these numbers, and it'll tell you what size injectors they are. And according to the number, that is a Siemens Deca 60 pound-an-hour injector that matches our chip. So I'm going to put our fuel injector connector back on there where I spun that injector around. So injectors match the chip matches the mass airflow translator. Don't know if it's tuned for the camshaft or not. That's the wild card, and we need to I guess check this thing for vacuum leaks. But you haven't even started the car up to see how bad it run. He unloaded off trailer the other day. I could tell it wasn't quite right. But it's cold outside and it's winter time. We're going to go through the basics here and figure out exactly what we're working with before we delve into, trying to change things to make things better, such as fuel pressure or, stuff like that. So we need to know 100% that the car we're working on is healthy and everything matches together and everything's going to work together. So we're going to do things in this video, like we're going to smoke test it, make sure we don't have no vacuum or boost leaks. We're going to compression test this thing here in a little while. We're going to see what our compression test numbers are. We're going to check for spark on all 6 cylinders. We're going to cover the basics. A lot of stuff that a lot of people overlook, and then we'll dive in deeper into the diagnosis portion of this at that time. But for his well-being and my well-being as the one working on it, I need to know 100% what I'm dealing with, and so does he. Well, let's get this thing smoke tested with our assistant Daisy. It's getting too cold for her to stay outside, so she's going to stay in here and hang out with us. So, in order to smoke test this, I'm just going to pull off the mass airflow boot right here and set it over to the side. This smoke tester I'm using is just a cheap Amazon job, and our little cone rubber adapter ought to fit tight into here. And that's going to let us test the intercooler and everything on the intake side of the track and make sure we don't have no leaks there. So these things operate pretty simply. You just want to make sure you get a good seal. And you're going to watch for me. and we'll go from there. And they come with 2 leads. You're just gonna hook them to your negative and your positive battery cable. These things don't use a lot of power. So, smoke machine there. It's gonna have a power switch. I will tag one of these, something similar. It'll be down here in the bottom where you usually see our merchandise, our Daisy shirts and stickers and things like that. So we'll let this thing sit here for a little while and pressurize and get good and hot, and then I'll be back. Well, the rough cut on our pipe ain't doing us no good, but we got stuff coming out of everywhere over here, so I'm gonna try to seal this up, and we'll repressurize this thing. All right, so I got her sealed off. I just flip that pipe around backwards. We have a pretty severe leak coming out right here in our intercooler coupler. Let's see if it is tight. And it's not. It's very loose, and so is the other side of it. So we get them sealed off. Yep, we're gonna have to tape that up. But we're getting leaks everywhere, So to clear all the smoke out, I'm gonna use this little Ogre leaf blower here to kind of blow the smoke out of the way. All right, so I put a piece of duct tape over a boost controller bleed hole. That's normal leak. That's not a big deal. Let's turn this thing back on and see what we got. It's probably still going to leak around this thing, unfortunately. It's just going to be one of those things that happen, but I hear air hissing somewhere, which means we're going to hear it start seeing some smoke other than a little wisp around this. Leaking right here. Our boost controller hose is hooked up, and we got some kind of hissing up here that I can't tell where exactly it's coming from. So let's get this sealed off, and then we can move up here. It's still coming from everywhere. It's coming around the turbo. It's coming out of the vacuum block up here. I think these clamps might be loose. No wonder it's running bad. It's got enough vacuum leaks to make any Turbo Buick run bad. Start with the basics. So it's the next day at this point, and I got everything kind of unhooked here. Every single one of these vacuum lines is leaking around it, smoking out this way. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to replace all these. I'm going to pull this off and make sure that the gasket's good and it's sealed off there. And I'm going to go ahead and cut all these vacuum lines out that are teed off and run all kinds of crazy. There's plenty of stuff blocked off that comes straight off the vacuum block on that side. So there's no reason to have the boost gauge teed off the map sensor. You should never tee anything off the map sensor or the fuel pressure regulator on any kind of turbo car. So I'm going to play some vacuum line roulette here, and I'll be back here in just a few minutes, and if I see anything surprising or way out of whack, we can go from there. And we got Daisy down here on the floor. She's wanting to go outside, but it's like 38 degrees. She'll turn into a little cat sickle. But you want to. You want to remind them about our merchandise store? And that your discount code Daisy is still active? Well, let me get busy fixing this stuff, and I'll be back here in a few minutes, guys. And I would video it, but it's not going to be fun stuff to watch. I'm just going to change vacuum lines, kind of reroute some stuff where it's a little better routed, and hopefully we fix those leaks and we can smoke test this thing again and make sure we don't have an intake plenum or a throttle body shaft leak that's severe, or, you know, a PVC valve that don't seal off. all those things are possibilities of issues that are common. You ever just found something makes you wonder how a car even run at all? I just found something. Let me flip it around. All right, and I've been eyeballing this connector right here, and it looks awful lot like our little friend that goes in our map sensor here, but it's plugged in to this. That goes from the map sensor to nowhere to loop back into itself. So the map sensor is not hooked up at all. Obviously this pigtail is broken and damaged. Might be able to take a pigtail off this and put it on that. But there's a running rich smoking gun. These things don't run real well with the map sensor unhooked. Usually hardly at all. So that's an issue. Well, back to the vacuum line mess. Every 5-minute job is a previously stripped bolt away from turning into a ordeal. These billet vacuum blocks for these cars. Okay? I'm gonna let you guys in a little secret. The thread engagement with the supplied bolts, by the time you add a gasket to this, is not sufficient. You will strip the throttle body bolts out. In this case of this car, the front one was snug, wasn't tight, because they technically don't tighten down in this configuration, not well. And the rear one was loose. Tried to tighten it down, pulled it out. Of course, the throttle body bolts are stripped in the throttle body. There's a couple ways you could remedy this. Those holes are plenty deep in that throttle body. They need something with about double that thread engagement. So you got two choices. You drill this billet block, put the recess down further, or you get longer bolts. Or in the case where you strip them out, that becomes a whole new level of fun. You don't have very many choices. You helicoil it back to the original size, or you can drill it out and tap it to a larger size. That is probably what I'm going to do with this car. I'm probably going to put some larger bolts in it, because the threads are weak anyway, but there ain't no way this thing was going to ever seal off. I put a few of these on. It's very easy, and I'm going to tell you, if you use these, it's very, very easy to strip these things out, especially with the gasket. You can run these without a gasket. Just make sure the throttle body's flat where the gasket is. Take the gasket off. This is going to be flat because it's machine billet. A little light coat of RTV and you can bolt this down and have plenty of thread engagement. The gasket's what takes the thread engagement away and causes somebody like me to have a multiple hour ordeal here trying to fix it. I'm still not done fixing vacuum lines. I was going to take this off, make sure the gasket and everything, and, you know, it was tight, and yeah, it wasn't. So man, this thing ought to run like a brand new car and get these things fixed. We'll just have to find out and see. Alright, I got the throttle body drilled and tapped. I want to show you, this is how deep the holes in the factory throttle body are. I'm going to put the bolt that I drilled and tapped it for. I drilled and tapped it for a 6x1.0 metric bolt, only because it's all I had that would look clean. If you look at the supplied bolt versus the thread depth, you can see you're just pulling on those top 3 or 4 threads. That's without a gasket. You add that gasket, yeah, you're screwed. You end up stripping throttle body out like this one. So I drilled them for 6x1.0, which means I had to drill out this hole just a little bit. It's going to look like that. But we're going to have plenty of thread engagement. and this thing will seal off this time. All right, ignore the shiny over there. I just sprayed a little semi-gloss on that. It's still wet, so it's super shiny on that old rough plate that got the leak there, because I moved the wiring harness down and cleaned up some of this mess over here in this corner. To the map sensor deal. This map sensor is only for the alky control kit. That looped harness was for the TPS. So somebody's been running this car without the map sensor for the engine. Yeah, that's going to have to be addressed. So I'm going to have to find a map sensor for it. I'll just tee off the vacuum line I put on this map sensor for both. That won't matter because these are both deadhead type things, so there's not going to be a pulse or a fluctuation between the two. So I got the TPS hooked up. I got all the vacuum lines re-ran on both sides. This is going to have to be addressed. The throttle don't open maybe 10-15%. Should just be able to loosen this gauge up and turn it. But I think I'm ready to smoke test this thing again and make sure we don't have any more leaks. So let's get the hoping. So we can move on to the next thing we need to check. Turn the little smoke machine on. And so far I'm not seeing anything, which is good, but it takes this thing just a few seconds to get everything pressurized good and start making the smoke. So this is definitely an improvement over yesterday, where we just had stuff chuffing out everywhere. So guys, if you mess with a turbo car or any kind of older 80s car, I highly suggest that you pick up one of those cheap smoke machines, because they're going to save you tons of time and tons of money swapping parts or testing things that you don't really need to. Because if these cars have vacuum leaks, that's going to be your number one evil. Now there is some things I'm going to go back in here and change later, like these hose clamps. I'm going to face them all the same direction, because this thing's quite the mess under the hood, and little things like that make everything look tacky. But so far so good. I'm not seeing anything. I'll take that back. We're starting to see some stuff over here, and I think it's around the throttle body seals. So a little leakage there is going to be normal, as long as we don't have that's exactly where it's leaking from, the throttle body seals now. So if you don't know, there's two seals on each side of the throttle shaft, and they're very hard to seal, so that's something kind of normal. But we're not seeing giant billows of smoke coming out of anywhere, so that is a 100% improvement over what we started with. And what I mean, you can see it right here, and this isn't a major leak by any means from the throttle shaft, but it is still something to notate here. But we're not leaking around the vacuum block, we're not leaking over here, we're not blowing stuff out over here. It's going to be normal to see a little come out of an open breather like this right here, because the PVC valve's not going to seal 100% off. But so far, so good. I feel pretty good about it at this point. So definitely a major improvement over what we started with. Like I said, it's not going to be 100% airtight because it's hard to seal off throttle seals. The PVC valve's not going to 100% seal off. You could put a one-way check valve in that PVC line, and that'll get rid of that little bit of boost leakage into the crankcase. Everybody wants to know why Turbo Buicks leak so much oil. That right there is one reason that does not help them on the oil leak. That, and you know, this base block is pretty much based off a 350 Buick. The design goes all the way back to the, you know, the late 50s. So you still got things like rope rear main seals, and everything's a cork gasket. So nothing lasts a real long time as far as staying sealed off of these cars. So I think we're good to move on to our next thing that we need to check. And that is going to be, we're going to compression test this car. Because there's no sense in wasting a whole bunch of time in it if the motor is weak. On a side note, this old Turbonetics Delta gate here, I just hooked their boost controller back up how it was. I smoke tested this thing. These aren't the best wastegate out there. They were okay back in the day, but when they get age on them, you start losing the seals inside. I was wondering why they had the side port, which should be for vacuum to help hold this thing shut so it spools faster. I smoke tested this, and it's pouring out of the shaft. The top seems to hold pressure. They've got the spring crammed all the way down in this thing, so I doubt it opens all the way. So I'm just going to put this back like it was until I can drive it and see what kind of boost it makes and how it responds. But yeah, there's something not very much not right here. So I guess I'm going to move on to moving that fuel pressure gauge, and I'll clean up some of the wires over here, see if I can mount that mass airflow translator somewhere else. We're going to take this old alarm system off this thing. It's in op, so I'm going to go ahead and start clipping that stuff out. Before I get started doing the compression test, I want to get the air filter stuff back on it. I need to figure out what I'm going to do about this rattling on the alternator bracket, but I want to get it back to a state where it could run if it needs to run. So it's yet another day, and I got all this cleaned up over here. Deleted cruise control, just clean this area up, straighten some wires up, move the hot wire kit for the fuel pump over here, the fuse for it. Since they had such long leads, they had them all just kind of shoved back in that hole. So got that cleaned up. I put some of the old wire loom I took off in some other places under the hood on those wires for the mass airflow translator. It's just hanging out here. I'm going to get rid of that zip tie once we get this thing running and driving. That way I can put some screws back in there, and we will probably clean this car up under the hood, you know, so we're not all dirty. And I will probably Velcro this thing somewhere in this area up out of the way. The overflow bottle that they got in here, it's just kind of hanging out too, so it's going to have to be mounted somewhere. Ideally, like I said before, this thing needs the correct radiator put in it. So let's get to that compression test. Let's get them plugs and the wires off of it, and that'll give us our first peek on the inside of the engine, and we'll go from there. As I expected, all the plugs are black and wet. Yeah. And the gaps range between 50 thousandths and 22 thousandths. So that's another issue all on its own, but let's get this thing compression tested. And before we start compression testing, we need to disable the ignition. Especially on this. So you're going to have a coil connector plug right here on the side of the ignition module. There's going to be a single bolt right here in the center. You're going to loosen that off and the connector comes off. And we're going to use a 1/4 inch socket and a 1/4 inch drive ratchet to take this off. So it's also good to inspect these connectors for corrosion it looks like it has a factory ignition control module on it. They're known for failure and the coils are known to melt. But you get this off here, and you come in here and just make sure you don't have no corrosion on these pins, on either side. Everything on this car looks okay. But the important thing is our ignition is now disabled. And I'm just going to use my little short extension right here. I'm going to chop the throttle open. The throttle's really not going to matter too much on these cars because you've got a lot of area to suck air through. So if you don't have a way to chop the throttle open, you can skip that step on a Turbo Buick. So I'm just going to screw my compression tester into the spark plug holes. We'll spin this thing over and we'll record our readings. And it looks like cylinder 1 here is about 170 psi, which is very good for one of these engines. And I'm going to repeat that 6 more times and I'll be back. Well, we had some very healthy compression numbers, especially for a Turbo Buick. We're about 170 to 175 psi between all 6 cylinders. They're all within 5 psi of each other, so that's great. So I'm just going to break out our Borescope here, get it turned on. We're just going to take a peek down these cylinders just to make sure everything looks great. See if we can see anything that we don't know. I'm already seeing some numbers on these pistons. Let's see if I can see something on this one. These things are really, really badly carboned up. In here, but it looks like we still got good crosshatch on the cylinder walls. It has ARP head studs in it. And unfortunately, these numbers are pretty carboned up. This right here is a good reason why we got good compression numbers. I don't know if you guys can see or not. I'll bring you in a little closer. But I can see right here on this one that this engine is 30 over. So it's been overboard. So it's definitely been to a machine shop. We need to see if we can't see this piston number just a little clearer than what we're seeing it. But it's right here. It looks like it's a Speed Pro piston, a 236-PA11-8. And that's L2481 sealed power forged piston in a 30 over flavor for a 231 Turbo Buick. So I'm gonna run this Borescope down in the other 3 cylinders and have a peek around in there, and then I'll be back, guys. And everything in here looks okay. It looks like it's had a valve job and stuff done to it. This is where the valve's cracked open. We can kind of see up behind it, but that's the only good thing about these articulating Borescopes. We can flip this thing 180 degrees down inside the cylinder and we can actually have a good look at 110% of what's going on. And another thing I missed when I pulled these plugs out, it had 3 NGK plugs in it in the UR4 flavor, and it's got 3 auto lights on the other side and an AR25, which is an auto light racing plug. But these plugs are hotter than these plugs, and it don't look like any of them is hot enough for the way this engine was running. Well, Well, I ordered the new set of spark plugs put in it. That way they're clean and fresh and done right. I ordered some plug wire separators to get rid of these zip ties that's got all the wires bundled together. You should never do that because you can create a misfire by doing that also. I'm also going to reroute these plug wires once the separators and plugs get here. But I think right now I'm going to go in here and address these clamps. I don't like them being turned all cattywampus away from each other. And it's also going to give me a chance while I got my Borescope out. We're going to run that down this throttle body and see if this thing may have a set of ported cylinder heads on it. Well, I got its throat opened up, and that throttle body is very nasty, including inside these pipes. It does have an old school RJC Racing plenum divider in it. If you don't know, those are supposed to help balance the airflow between the cylinders. Generally, I don't run anything in a Turbo Buick intake. I just run it open. But those do help a little bit on torque and distributing the airflow around. Not something I would personally added, but it's not going to hurt anything, I don't think. So let me see if I can't get a little deeper. It's going to be hard to get past this little feller in there, and we can go from there. And we definitely do not have any cylinder head porting or intake porting. You can see the giant ledge there. You see the rough cast up there at the top, up in that area. You can see the valve guide right there. So don't think it's going to be nothing special. So other than a set of forged pistons and the camshafts in it, I'm going to assume that it's just a stock freshen up rebuild. Going to highly doubt it's got any kind of rods in it because it does not have a set of ported heads on it. Turbo Buick stuff responds really well to a ported cylinder head. It also responds very well to a ported intake manifold. This don't have none of it. Should still be a very good running vehicle once we get all these issues straightened out, but now we know a little further what we're dealing with. So we'll go from here. Anyway, I had all the stuff, take all these clamps off. I figured I'd have a look in here. It's gonna be hard for you guys to see, but I have a peek inside the turbo here. It does not, well, yeah, it is a billet wheel unit. I can see the machine marks on it. Probably looks like a standard wheel to you guys, but it does have a billet wheel turbo on it, and looks like it's got a fair amount of oil. So it's got a billet wheel turbo, and that oily residue is probably from my smoke machine that runs off baby oil. Insert joke there. But on a serious note, these smoke machines, they'll work on just about anything, including baby oil. It does stink when it is burned, but it does leave a residue like that, and that's what that smells like. That's in the turbo, so no worries there. That'll burn off, get sucked through, you know, do that whole thing. So I had to get this pipe button back up. I got all my clamps turned where they're even, so these is probably the most fun thing to get on one of these cars. These radiator hose picks help a ton when trying to keep behind them silicone couplers and get them pulled back out. So, well, I went ahead and opened up our axis here. It didn't have no screws in it, just that zip tie. I wanted to check the settings right here and make sure they had this all set right. So they got this set on 3, which is for the 3.5 inch LS1 sensor that is then adds 10% to the base. So we're adding 10% of fuel via this, so this needs to be swapped back to position number 2. All these need to be zeroed out as far as any fuel configuration right now, and it does appear that this switch is in the right position. So let's need to make sure this thing's not going to add any fuel, and make sure it's on the correct adjustments here. These dial switches, just so we don't have any issues. One thing I'm going to note on here This thing is fairly corroded inside, so I'm going here with some electrical cleaner and a soft brush, and I am going to clean these contacts just in case any of these are bridged in here. It looks like it has been wet several times and it's not in the best of shape. Until we get this thing back running, I won't be able to tell if it's any good or not, but we'll start off with putting this thing back on a baseline. When cleaning something like this, the way I'm cleaning it, you don't want to use anything stiff, so I'm just using this little nylon brush. I just want to make sure we're not going to get any contact bridging on this chip or any of these little capacitors inside this. I'm just using a mass airflow meter cleaner. It'll be fine, and we'll blow this thing out. So we're cleaned up the best it's going to clean up. It still don't look all that hot in there, but we don't have no fuzzy step between terminals now. I went ahead and pulled the screws out of it and checked the back side. It's fine, but these are not watertight units, guys, so you don't want to sit it where it's somewhere flat, or you don't want to mount it over here where water can run in it. You want to keep it on your inner side of things in here. And you want to keep it at a kind of an angle, that way water, if it does get in it, can get out of it. So I'm just going to pop the top cover back on it and throw the zip tie back on it for now, and till we get this thing running and we can do some adjustments on it. And then once we're done doing adjustments on it, I will mount this thing somewhere where it can stay dry, and we will put the screws back in it that are supposed to be in it, assuming it's good. This could be bad too, especially after seeing what I've seen inside of it. So if one thing, it sure didn't need 10% more fuel, and I think our fuel pressure may be high too, but until I can get this thing run it, I'm not going to mess with the fuel pressure. So still waiting on spark plugs and wire separators. I had to order a not mass airflow sensor, but a map sensor for it, and it won't be here for multiple days. So I say once we get the plugs and wires back in this thing, this will be a good place to break this video off, and in our next video we'll get this thing started up. We'll clean up this mess under here, and maybe we can take this thing down the road and see how it runs, and maybe do a little tweaking on this, and you know, assuming, it's all assuming that everything's going to be good once this thing fires off. Well, got some fresh plugs and some plug wire separators. I'm going to set these on the tight side of 30 thousandths for a gap. Get these put in there. Well, got all the plugs and wires all straightened out, and it looks a ton better. We don't have plug wires going everywhere, and they're not all just lumped over here on this side of the engine, and same with over there. Should be far enough spaced apart that we shouldn't have any crossfiring issues or anything like that. So at this point, guys, I had to order, like I said earlier in this video, I had to order a map sensor and a pigtail to fix this broken clip on this pigtail. There's supposed to be a factory map sensor right here. They had the map sensor that controls the Alky control kit as the only map sensor, and had it bolted in this position. So cost wise, it's a whole lot cheaper to order this stuff, this pigtail and the map sensor, and a good name brand from Rock Auto, than it is to get it local at 10 times the cost, literally 10 times the cost for both pieces. So we're kind of at a stalemate here as far as getting this thing back running, because I don't want to run it and foul those new plugs out. And there's no sense in running it, because it's never going to run right without this hooked up. So, I don't know. But I have seen enough bad on this car to know that I'm even amazed it even started running in the first place, much less drove off the trailer and into the shop. I have not drove this car. I've not run this car since he unloaded it. I'm glad I haven't, because without the map sensor, this thing is going to run like it has zero vacuum. So it's going to be in that boost transition area. And with it unplugged, it's going to go into a default. Either way, it's not good for air fuel things, or, you know, clean plugs. And that's why the spark plugs were black in it. But all the other stuff that was screwed up on the car wasn't helping that situation either. So I look forward to getting this thing running, because I do feel like we're going to make leaps and bounds in the quality of how this car runs. So that said, guys, I'm going to have to leave that off to the next video, because this one's probably getting pretty long by now. So if you haven't yet, make sure you hit that like button, share these videos with your friends. If you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button. It does help the channel grow. If you are a subscriber, I greatly appreciate you guys. I look forward to everybody's comments down below. So until our next video, guys, thank you for watching. I'll see you at the next one. Wait, don't go anywhere yet. I'm going to show you one more scary thing. So he's got this little bitty transmission cooler up here with 2 fuel line clamps holding it on. Now I thought maybe that transmission cooler run into that, but they have the engine oil cooler run into that little bitty transmission cooler up there, and then the transmissions just run into the radiator up here. We'll address that next video. See you then.